All right, let's talk about for loops. Now, like I said, it has an explicit beginning and end. We know how many times, or maybe we don't know how many times, but we know it's going to finish eventually, right? Maybe we want it to go through 10 times. Maybe we want it to go through 15. However, it's going to have a beginning and an end. Again, while loops are more designed for conditional kind of things. So while I'm in motion is true, keep running this loop, keep checking my sensor readings, right? Phones do this. So for example, with your phones, I have a smartwatch, and when I go for runs, it automatically starts recording that run even if I don't click anything. So it's checking that. It's saying, while this watch is moving this fast, record this, or record his stats, right? Once the subject goes less than that speed, stop recording and end the run, right? So the while loop, it doesn't know when it's going to end. It doesn't really know when it's going to start either. It's just, while this is true, do this. However, a for loop, it'll say, for 15 times, run this code. So here's the structure of a for loop. It begins with the for statement, right? Just like a while loop starts with a while, if statement starts with if, so on and so forth. And then you see we create an int I, so we're actually creating a variable that's going to be our index, how many times we go through this loop. But do be mindful that if I create this integer here, I can only use it within these two brackets. I can't use it before or after the for loop. We're starting at I equal to whatever the first index we want. We can set this equal to 5. We can set it equal to 10. Right now, I'm setting it equal to 0. And then we have our condition. We want the loop to stop, right? Say, for example, I have I equals 0, I is less than number. If I set number equal to 10, this loop will occur 10 times. And then I have I++, so each time I want to increment I. And if you remember back to last class, I did the same thing in a while loop, and I'll show you that in a second. You can do the same thing in a while loop. It's possible. The for loop is just, it's for a certain amount of times, right? I can also switch this up. I can do I is greater than number, I minus minus, and that'll decrement I. So right here, I'm incremented from 0 to 9. Whereas if I set int I equals 10, I is greater than number, and I set number equal to 0, I minus minus, that'll go through 10 times as well. However, I will start at 10 and go all the way down to 1. So I just got a quick example. Say, for example, I want to print hello world 5 times, right? System.out.println hello world. One, you can do this with explicit statements, right? You would have to just repeat this 5 times. And what if this isn't 5? What if it says print hello world 500 times? You wouldn't want to write system.out.println hello world 500 times. This is where you would have a loop coming in. You can do a while loop. Int number equals 0, while number is less than 5, system.out.println hello world. And I'll show you that in some code. All right. New project, Java application. Next, we'll name this lecture 13. All right. Zoom in for you. So again, I could just do system.out.println hello world. And then I could just repeat this 5 times. Is that 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. If I run it, it says hello world 5 times. I could also do this with a while loop, right? I do need an index, so int index equals 0, while index is less than 5, print this right here. And then of course, since it doesn't automatically increment index plus plus. If I don't add that in there, this loop will always run indefinitely, right? Because index will always be less than 5. It'll stay at 0. So I run this, bam, 5 times again. However, you could also do this with a for loop, right? And here I'm setting number equal to 5, but number could be anything. So whereas here I have my while loop, I can do int number equals 5, and then do a for loop. For int I equals 0, I is less than number, I plus plus. And be mindful, you do need these semicolons in here as well for the for loop. But you see I can take that index out and it automatically increments for me. Hello world. But like I was saying before, this I created this variable in here, and I can system.out.println I can print I out inside the for loop, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. However, I cannot use I outside the for loop. Right? That's going to be an error. If I wanted to do that, I would have to declare I out here in I equals 0. And the for I equals 0. I don't have to redeclare it inside that for loop. And now I can use I outside of it. And you see the last index of I would actually be 5. So once it hits this, it's going to check I is less than number. It's no longer less than number if it equals 5. And then it prints out I. And the beauty of this is number can be whatever you want it to be. Let's say, for example, I want to read from the console, right? System.out.println, enter the number of times you want to loop, right? Then I need a scanner, input equals new scanner, system.in. Remember, you could do Control-Shift-I, okay? And then I could do int number equals input dot next int, right? And let me do int I right here. And now I'm reading in from the console how many times I want to loop this for loop. Right? It's not a declared statement. I didn't set number equal to anything, but you know this for loop will end once I reaches number. So I can put in enter the number of times you want to loop. I can put in 20, and it's going to print hello world 20 times. Right? I can put in 10. It's going to go through 10 times. I want to show you what I equals each time. So I goes from 0 to whatever I put in minus 1, right? But that is 10 increments, right? From 0 to 9, that's 10 numbers. If I go again, I can do 20. It goes from 0 to 19. I can also do this. Say, for example, I wanted to start at 1 and not 0. So int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to number. So now it's going to go from 1 to 20. Let me change this up a little bit. Instead of a print line, let me do a print. Now it's going to go from 1 to 20, right? Inclusively, because I did less than or equal to. However, if I accidentally make this a 0, it's actually going to loop through this thing 21 times, because 0, again, is inclusive. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of those numbers actually equals 21 different numbers, even though it stops at 20, but 0 in there makes it 21 numbers. So if I want only 20, I'll do int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to number. That gets me exactly 20. Or I can do int I equals 0, I is less than number. That gets me exactly 22. And that'll come in handy in the future when we talk about arrays. because arrays always start at index 0, so you want to start at 0. So for example, if I want to print out an entire array or a string, right? So if we have this string right here, string hello equals hello world. If I have that string right there, all right. And say, for example, I want to print out each individual character, right? Each individual character. Well, again, if you think back to the slide about strings, the first index of a string is 0 until length minus 1, right? So we could do that. So we can do int I equals 0, I is less than hello dot length I plus plus, right? And now we could print out each individual character, hello dot char at I. And now it's going to print out each individual character of that string. See, HELLO space WORLD. So that's what for loops come in handy as well. When you're doing arrays or strings, you want to get the entire array, or you want to iterate through the entire array and see if something occurs. So in here, I can have an if statement, if hello dot char at I, right, equals, let's say, O. System.out.println. This is an O. Right? I want a special condition for when one of those characters is an O. So I can iterate through this whole string, and it's going to say this is an OO. This is an OO, right? Because it's printing out the O's. I can do an else here, and I can do away with that double. Run this again. You see down here, for each one of those O's, it prints out this is an O. All right. So that's what for loops come in handy. Again, you can just repeat code over and over again. It really comes in handy when you're iterating through an array, which is what a string is, right? An array is like a large container with several different compartments in that container, from 0 to whatever the length of that container is minus 1. And each compartment within that container can have a different object, can have a different number, a different string in it, a different character in it. That's pretty much what an array is. It's a big bucket with containers lined up right next to each other inside that bucket. You know, we can iterate through that entire container using a for loop. So I'm going to go through a couple examples. So let's do this problem. I took it straight from the book, and either your lab or your homework assignment is very, very similar to this, so you might want to pay attention. So write a program that displays the following table. Note 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. All right, so if you want to tackle this problem, the first thing we need to do, I'm looking at this now, is write out miles, kilometer. That's kind of like the header of that table, right? So system.out.println miles, kilometers. Bam, that's the first line we need. And you see it prints out miles, kilometers. All right, now let's go to the problem. And as I look at this problem, we're only going to 10. We're not ever going more than 10. So I can use a for loop for this, right? I can use a for loop to print all these out. Again, I could write out all of these statements individually, but I would have to write out 10 different statements. That's inefficient. So I just write a for loop. So the first, I look at this, and my for loop should go from 1 to 10, right? Not 0 to 9, but I wanted to go from 1 to 10 because that's how many calculations I'll be doing. And I want to use this index, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So for loop, int I equals 1, I is less than or equal to 10, right? I wanted to go from 1 to 10, I plus plus. All right, so now I have the general structure of my for loop. I'm going to go from 1 to less than or equal to 10. So it's going to go from 1 to 10. Inside here, really the only thing I need to do now is system.out.println. The first thing I need to print is that index, so I want to print out this 1 right here. Plus, I need a dash in here. And then plus I times 1.609. I believe that was the conversion. Yep. And I'm finished. All right, so each time it's going to print out I and then do the conversion. I can also do this right here, double conversion equals I times 1.609. And then I can put conversion down here instead of that statement. All right, same thing. I print this out, and there you go. And remember, even though I is an integer, since I'm multiplying it with a double right here, it converts this whole thing into a double. Okay. Questions about this example right here? I'm going to go to another example. Any questions? Put it in the chat if you have a question, or speak up, either one. This is what your homework and assignment or lab will be on, so any questions, I'm happy to help. If not, I will continue. All right, well, I'm going to continue. All right, the next problem is a little bit more wordy, and it sounds a lot more complex than it actually is. So the problem, suppose the tuition for a university is $10,000 this year, we wish, and increases 5% every single year. In 1 year, the tuition will be $10,500, that's 5%. Write a program that displays the tuition in 10 years and the total cost of 4 years worth of tuition starting after the 10th year. So let me translate this. So let's say, for example, tuition for the year 2020 is $10,000, right? Each year after that, it increases by 5%. So I want to see what that final tuition would be in the year 2030, okay? And then I want to see how much somebody would pay over the course of 4 years if they started school in 2030. All right, so that's pretty much what we're trying to do here. All right, let's do this. All right, we know double tuition currently equals 10,000. All right, that's what we know. In the year 2020, the year 2020 tuition is $10,000, right? And now we want to find out, determine tuition in year 2030. We want to know what the tuition will be in the year 2030. Okay. We know the double increase rate equals 0.05. Right, that's 5%. 5% in a proportion is 0.05. So we know that's the increase rate. All right. So now what we have to do is do a for loop 10 times and calculate the tuition each time. So how do we do a for loop 10 times? Well, first we create our for, and I equals 0. I is less than 10, I plus plus. And that's going to go through 10 times, right? And this is compounding interest. So we wanted to keep increasing every single year based on the previous year's tuition. So if you look at the problem, it says, in 1 year, the tuition will be $10,500. Well, I want to see what that is. 5% of $10,500, add that to that. Add another 5%, add another 5%. It's compounding interest, right? And there is a simple interest calculator out there, an equation, but for this example, I want to show you how to do a for loop to do this. All right, let's do a double added tuition equals our current tuition times increase rate, right? So whatever the new value that we're adding to tuition is, I want to calculate that by doing our current tuition times whatever that increase rate is. And let's just, for this example, let's print out what the added tuition is. Let's print that out each time. And then for that year, we want to set tuition plus equal added tuition. We want to actually add that tuition to it. So now we can print out system 2030 So now that we know at the conclusion of these 10 loops, that tuition will be calculated, and now we can print it out. System.out.println 2030 tuition plus, and we're storing it in that variable. Let's do this right here. System.out.println 2020 tuition system.out.println increase rate. Right, so we can see what all those are. Added tuition, and then final tuition. And you'll see each year the amount added will increase because tuition is increasing, right? So our 2020 tuition is $10,000. Our increase rate is 0.05 or 5%. So you see the first year, the added tuition is $500. Then we add that 500 to tuition. Then again, the added tuition is $525 now because the tuition increases each year. Let's do this. Instead of doing 1, let's do less than or equal to 10. Let's see. Yeah. Here we go. And then I'm going to print this out. System.out.println 2020 plus I tuition. I want to print out what the tuition is each time. For that given year. All right. And then I do need to calculate tuition one more time. All right. So let's look at this. 2020 tuition. Or look at this. 2020 tuition is $10,000. Our increase rate is 0.05. All right. So our added tuition is $500. And then in 2021, our new tuition is $10,500. Right. And then we increase from there. Added tuition of this is $525, and our new tuition is this. And so on and so forth. And you see it compounds upon itself. And I actually need to do this less than or equal to 10. And let's do, instead of this right here, we're going to do 2020 plus I. All right, that's going to be a number plus. All right. There we go. And now you see it goes from 2020, $10,000, all the way to 2030, which would be $16,288 in 2030, even though some of us are paying that in 2020. All right. So now that we've calculated tuition, we know what 2030 tuition is. The next part of this problem is display the total cost of 4 years worth of tuition starting after the 10th year. So if somebody started in 2030, what would 4 years of tuition be for them? So the first thing I think of is 4 years, I need a for loop for 4 times. So 4 and I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus. And like I said before, since I created I right here, I can use it again down here because I is only relevant in this for loop. Right? I didn't put it up here or down here, so I can recreate it down here inside this for loop. And I equals 0, I is less than 4, I plus plus. All right, so now we need a variable to hold what that person would pay at the end of those 4 years. So double final cost equals 0, right? All right, so now we have the final cost equal to 0, and now we need to add tuition to that each year. So pretty much we just add tuition. We already calculated what tuition would be in the year 2030. So now we need to calculate the final cost. So final cost plus equal tuition. And remember, tuition increases each year. So we need this statement as well. And we need this statement because tuition would be increasing as well. If we just had this right here, it would just add 16.288 over and over again. But we know tuition increases each year, so we need these two statements. And finally, after the for loop, right after we do all this calculation, system.out.println final cost after 4 years plus final cost. All right? And that'll print out what this person would pay after 4 years of tuition. So their final cost would be $70,270 or $207 and about 39 cents. Okay. And I know that was kind of a lot, but I'm going to review this real quick and then call it a class. So the first thing we need to do is determine what this year's tuition is, and according to the problem, it's $10,000. Right? And then we know each year it increases by 0.05% or 0.05 or 5%, right? And that's what I printed out here, tuition and increase rate, right? And so we can see what this year's tuition is and how much it increases every year thereafter. Next, I want to determine what the tuition is in the year 2030. So what will that tuition be when we reach 2030? If it increases every single year from 2020 by 5%, what would that tuition be at the year 2030? So right here, I'm calculating what the increase would be for this particular year. So we know the increase rate is 0.05. So I'm multiplying tuition times that increase rate to get whatever the added tuition would be for that year. And then I'm adding this tuition increase to the cost of tuition for that year. And I print it out for whichever year it is. This for loop goes from 1 to 10 because I want to iterate 10 times, but I also wanted to use this index right here to calculate the year. And let me just show you that right here. So year, int year equals 2020 plus I. All right, so when I equals 1, this would be the year 2021. When I equals 2, the year 2022. So I can put year plus tuition and then print out the tuition. All right, and if I run this right here, I'm going to comment this code out just so you can see this part of the code, this right here running. And you see down here, it calculates each year's tuition. So in the year 2021, the added tuition was $500. That's the final tuition, so on and so forth. Okay. And then down here, the next part of the problem was to calculate what somebody would pay after 4 years of tuition starting in the year 2030. Right? Starting in the year 2030, we know what the tuition is. It's $16,000 something. So if somebody was a freshman in that year, when they graduate in 4 years, hopefully, what would be their final cost of attendance? What was the final payment or bill, or whatever you want to call it? So we know when you start school, technically, your final bill is $0 until you start taking classes. So now we know tuition in the year 2030 already because we did that up here. So we add tuition to that final cost. So in the first year, they got to pay that tuition. And then we know each year after that, it increases by 5%. And we add that to the next year's tuition. And we repeat this process 4 times until we get their final cost of attendance, which would be $70,207. That's a lot. Any questions? Any at all? All right, well, that'll do it for today. Now we'll see you on Friday.